Middle East escalation, promises, reality, and the cost of conflict. In the current phase of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the official narrative is one of caution and restraint. Israel publicly pledged to minimize civilian harm and temporarily avoid large-scale artillery strikes in Gaza following international pressure. Yet reports from Rafah, Yunis, and other areas indicate ongoing artillery shelling, targeted airstrikes, and widespread destruction. According to verified sources, hundreds of structures have been damaged or destroyed in the past weeks, with casualties continuing to rise. Hospitals and clinics report severe strain as they attempt to treat the injured under intermittent electricity and water supply, while humanitarian corridors remain contested. The Palestinian Ministry of Health reports dozens of civilians killed daily, with children representing a significant proportion of casualties. Official statements from Israel emphasize targeted operations against militant infrastructure, asserting that strikes aim to degrade Hamas capabilities and restore security. Witnesses and humanitarian reality. Footage from the ground tells a more harrowing story. Independent recordings show doctors and emergency responders visibly shaken, treating wounded civilians amidst rubble. Women and children are being driven from their homes, fleeing under fire or forced evacuations. Places of worship, including mosques, have reportedly been targeted or appropriated to remove civilians during Ramadan, a month traditionally observed as sacred and nonviolent. These actions underscore the human cost that exceeds official statements or casualty tallies. Observers note psychological trauma across affected populations and systematic pressure on residents in both Gaza and border communities. Civilians describe uncertainty, fear, and the disruption of daily life, highlighting the profound humanitarian impact of ongoing operations despite official promises of restraint. International support and funding. Major states, including United States, Germany, and France, continue to publicly affirm support for Israel, providing financial, military, and diplomatic backing. This includes billions in military aid from the United States, as well as advanced weapon systems and intelligence sharing agreements. Europe has largely endorsed the security rationale while simultaneously restricting similar support to Palestinian authorities. The narrative often centers on the events of October 7th as the initial provocatory incident, which frames subsequent Israeli operations as defensive. Critics note that this perspective omits broader historical context, including decades of territorial disputes, blockades, and sporadic violence, resulting in a partial framing of responsibility. Technology, militarization, and ethical questions. Israel's defense industry has been heavily sponsored by international partners, leading to the development of advanced technologies including AI-guided weapon systems and autonomous targeting platforms. Self-shooting rifles and drones, partially funded and developed with foreign capital, demonstrate the technological sophistication of modern conflict but also raise ethical concerns about civilian risk and accountability. The international investment in such technology creates a complex calculus. States supporting Israel benefit from access to innovations, defense research collaboration, and strategic influence in the region, but are also indirectly implicated in actions that cause civilian suffering. Historical and moral dimensions. Europe's alignment with Israel is informed in part by historical conscience. Germany, for instance, frames its support as a moral imperative to prevent repetition of past atrocities, even if this leads to contemporary ethical tensions. The United States has emphasized a combination of strategic alliance, regional stability, and domestic political consensus as the rationale for continued support. Britain, historically involved in the initial partition plan, has seen its diplomatic position evolve, yielding influence but also criticism over perceived partiality. This alignment has contributed to a geopolitical imbalance. Israel continues operations with international backing, while Palestinian civilian infrastructure and aid remain constrained. Economically, the conflict drives defense contracts, influences regional trade, and maintains global attention on energy security and humanitarian assistance. Ethical and geopolitical implications. The ongoing violence underscores the tension between state security, moral responsibility, and civilian protection. Innocent Palestinians and Israelis alike are caught in cycles of escalation and retaliation. The selective international support raises questions about fairness, proportionality, and accountability. Geopolitically, the situation reinforces existing alliances, shapes regional influence, and highlights the role of international funding in sustaining asymmetric warfare. Economically, defense investments, aid programs, and infrastructure rebuilding create ripple effects that extend beyond the region, affecting markets, energy supply, and global perception of ethical governance. Looking forward, the current phase, marked by promises of restraint contradicted by artillery strikes, shows how humanitarian norms, military strategy, and geopolitical interests collide. The continued use of AI-driven weaponry and international funding raises long-term ethical and strategic questions. Who decides the rules of engagement, and how are civilian lives protected? For Americans and Europeans, the lessons are systemic. Decisions in Washington, Berlin, and London influence not only the regional balance of power but also the ethical framing of global politics. The conflict illustrates that modern warfare is intertwined with technology, finance, and moral responsibility, and that civilian suffering often becomes a secondary consideration in strategic calculus. Ultimately, the ongoing escalation challenges all observers to consider both the human and political consequences, demanding critical engagement with the realities behind official statements, funding, and technological deployment.